We begin tonight with a series of reports spanning the various states and geographical regions in Nigeria, with conveners of the Endbadgovernance protest keeping to their word to hit the streets to kickstart a plethora of issues, all centered around economic hardship. The protests, which were largely compliant to the state's objective, witnessed large turnouts in most states, as well as some violence in other states. But even as areas such as Southeast were mostly quiet, residents chose to remain indoors. The demonstrations in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, began quietly earlier today, but it later turned violent, with tear gas canisters being fired at the protesters by the police. An attempt to gain entry into the government house by a large group of protesters in Gombe State was repelled, with the police fending them off with tear gas canisters. A policeman sustained bullet wounds in Kaduna State, while demonstrations in Borno State, which left 4 people dead, led to the declaration of a 24-hour curfew by the police command. But right here in Lagos State, Nigeria's commercial hub, anti-protest demonstrators were chased away by the pro-group, while the Lekki toll gate, the epicenter of the 2020 EndSARS protesters who converged there, were dispersed by the police. Police fired tear gas at protesters in Asaba, the Delta State capital, just as Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his Bayelsa State counterpart commended protesters in their various states for being peaceful. And in line with an ex parte court order, Abuja protesters occupy the entrance of Moshood Abiola Station in chanting solidarity songs, bearing placards, bearing some of their demands. However, things took a different turn when they moved towards the Eagle Square and the 3-armed zone.
Protesters gather at the entrance of the Moshood Abiola Stadium, chanting solidarity songs and holding placards, displaying their demands. They call for improved governance, economic reforms, and an end to police brutality, creating a vibrant and determined atmosphere as they voiced their concerns.
People are selling their properties to pay for children's school fees. We are not asking for anything much. We are asking that Nigeria should be fixed.
They continue with their demonstration outside of the stadium, in spite of calls from the police commissioner for the protesters to go into the National Stadium for the protest.
The issue is that they are blocking the express road. And the order said they should go inside the stadium and protest.
The protest was earlier scheduled to hold at the Eagle Square and the Unity Fountain in Abuja. However, they were denied approvals and both venues were taken over by security personnel. Back at the stadium, these buses arrived carrying counter-protesters. The police became compelled to step in to prevent possible clash between the two groups. Nevertheless, the End Hardship and Bad Governance protesters later decided to march to the Eagle Square, but it was not to be as the police deployed tear gas to disperse them. The police intercepted them at the entrance to the 3-armed zone, where a series of tear gas canisters were fired. The situation is even worse outside the city center. The protest turned violence along the Karu, Nyanya, Nasarawa Road, Kubwa, Zuba, Kaduna Road, and the Gwagwalada axis of Abuja. In the last 2 weeks, there have been calls from individuals, groups, and the government for citizens to shun the protest. However, neither of those appeals nor the resistance from the police appear to have deterred these protesters, as they vow to continue with the protest against what they say is bad governance and hardship.
Various groups from across northern Nigeria have taken to the streets to protest what they call bad governance in the country. Well, they made several demands to government to end the hardship by reworking some policies that led to the high cost of living in the country. From Taraba to Adamawa, the groups came out in their numbers, holding placards with inscriptions of their grievances against the government.
Protesters from different parts of Kano State stormed the streets early this morning, chanting anti-government slogans. A 70-year-old is among the many protesters who marched to the government house to voice their grievances.
You see, the situation we find ourselves today is if we are back to the period of barbarism. As if there is no knowledge, no education.
We the youth, we are the future of Nigeria. So if they destroy our life now, so how do you expect us that we can be able to build the nation further, right?
The governor received the protesters and pledged to transmit their complaints to the president.
This street caucus, the DG protocol is here. It took us 2 months making lists. If they bring, I say no, I will go one after the other till I made sure there wasn't any personal interest. First batch, second batch were given a 50,000.
Some students marched around the farm center area of the state in solidarity with the present administration, while others went to Alhaji Amin Ado Bayero to deliver their message.
Well, there are means of protesting. In a dialogue, you still protest, but you don't approach the government. Hoodlums are ever ready to, hijack the process. We know the experience of NSAS, and we don't want that experience to repeat itself.
On behalf of the team in youth of Kano State, coalition of ambassadors, to deliver our message to the Emir of Kano, Alhaji Amin Bayero, to take it to the president.
The protest snowballed into violence as hoodlums set fires at the government house entrance, the generator house of the NCC Digital Industrial Park, and some vehicles at the Kano State High Court along State Road ablaze.
What is the situation? I said, can't you see smoke in the fire? I need reinforcement. When they sent reinforcement to this place, when the people saw the crowd of boys, there were over 5,000. After some time, they left.
This situation prompted the state governor to impose a 24-hour curfew across the state.
Therefore, and based on the powers conferred on me by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as the Chief Security Officer of the state, I have therefore declared 24 hours curfew in the state with immediate effect.
Meanwhile, in Jigawa State, the APC secretariat was set on fire as police dispersed protesters at the government house in Dutse, the state capital.
The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Mr. Nyesom Wike, says a federal lawmaker has been identified as the sponsor of the nationwide protest. The minister made this revelation while briefing journalists after a closed-door meeting with heads of security agencies in the FCT. He also cautioned protesters in the Federal Capital Territory to obey the court order and stick to the use of MKO Abiola Stadium for the protest in the coming days.
We have come out to say clearly that one of the reasons government is appealing to you not to carry this protest, that we believe some miscreants will take advantage and cause mayhem and cause destruction of property within the FCT. See what has happened in most of the states today. Kano is there. Kaduna is there. See what happened in Bauchi. We do. And that's why we say, look, we are aware. You have said this, you want it to be resolved. Now, look at the loss of lives in Kaduna. See what happened in Kano. And for the vigilance of security agencies, and such a thing happens in the FCT, what would we think people will say? Here we have international communities carrying out their businesses, residing in the FCT. So, we think that this country belongs to all of us. We think that we must work according to the rule of law, and working according to the rule of law is obeying God's orders. We believe that if you want to have intelligence, that yes, you may attempt, and you may not have fully discussed, may not have succeeded what they wanted to do, carry out. And we have intelligence that, look, they are coming up tomorrow to destroy property that would lead to loss of life. The security agencies will not allow every protester. Please go to the Moshida Stadium and do your protest. Now, we also have intelligence that a senator has to advise on security agencies to lead some of them to go and provide food to the protesters. That is sponsorship. A senator providing food for protesters. At the end of the time, the security agencies will invite the senator and find out how you will be sponsoring this kind of against the government of the day.
In part two, after the break, more demonstrators vent their grievances in the southern region of the country. Please join us then. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, coming to you live on Channels Television from Lagos. A reminder of our main stories. Demonstrators took to the streets in major cities across the nation to protest against economic hardship despite the government's last-ditch efforts to prevent the protest. 4 states declare curfews as vandals loot and destroy properties in Kano, Jigawa, Yobe, Nasarawa, Kaduna and Borno states, where 4 people lost their lives. And the Federal Capital Territory Minister Nyesom Wike says security agencies in the territory have identified a senator as one of those sponsoring the anti-government protests. We continue with the protests now, and we find out how various groups in the northern part of the region spend their own day. From Taraba to Adamawa, the groups came out in their numbers, holding placards with inscriptions telling the government about their grievances.
Like others in southern Nigeria, residents of Taraba State in northeast Nigeria started the day trickling out to the streets of Jalingo, the state capital, to join the demand for good governance. They were chanting solidarity songs, guarded by security agencies.
Terrorists want to use the opportunity to cause mayhem by planting IEDs and detonating such and all that. So there is need for us to.
Clear in the protesters' chants is the call for the federal government to tackle hunger and reverse the removal of fuel subsidy.
The subsidy has made a hardship has made the life of the citizen artificially very hard.
The scenes were somewhat the same in Adamawa State, howbeit dramatic. While a group on the streets was demanding the end of the present administration, another group had converged on Ribadu Square, singing the praises of the president. The resounding cry for good governance echoed among the protesters in Katsina State under the aegis of struggle for good governance.
It is disheartening that Nigeria that is blessed with different mineral resources, but today the citizens of Nigeria are dying for hunger, starvation, and insecurity.
The demonstrators were on the streets of Kaduna too, beginning from Kawu in Kaduna North local government area, carrying placards with different inscriptions. The protesters marched peacefully, but later turned violent and throwing stones while attempting to gain entrance into the government house. They were dispersed by security operatives after attempts to block major roads within the state capital. One police officer was hit as the protesters resisted efforts to disperse them. The protest erupted in Gombe State despite assurances from several groups and efforts of the government to partake in the nationwide exercise. The situation, however, took a turn for the south when the peaceful protest turned violent. The mob made its way to Gombe Government House, brandishing placards with various inscriptions of their demands, chanting "We demand justice" in the local language. Security operatives formed a fortress at the main gate of the government house, but soon the situation escalated. The situation in Yobe State took a turn for the south when peaceful protests turned violent. Several buses were destroyed and some government facilities were not spared by the Irish protesters. Sokoto recorded a general peaceful protest with the evidence of the presence of security personnel. In contrast to the protests that rocked other parts of the country, Kebbi State remained calm and peaceful. Some say this is a result of a unanimous decision by major youth groups in the state not to participate in the protest. Meanwhile, the Association of Local Governments of Nigeria, ALGON, is calling for calm.
We are very much aware and understand the frustrations and grievances that have led to the call for protest, but I believe that dialogue and collaboration can yield more positive outcomes.
Major protests were recorded in other parts of northern Nigeria. While some were demanding an end to bad governance, others protested in favor of the government.
The impact of the first day of the nationwide protest is felt in different parts of the Lagos metropolis as malls, markets, banks and other businesses were all shut. Protesters gathered at the Ikeja area and ended their procession near the Gani Fawemi Park in Lagos. Our correspondent Dari Idu reports.
Attention, we don't know when people will just come and
Bright and early, the designated ground for the protest was occupied by policemen who sing morale-boosting songs.
One body, one body. Gala, give me one body, one body. Gala, you say, give me one body, one body.
As the day wears on, the protests gather momentum, with protesters gathering at Ikeja under bridge. In other parts of the state, especially at the Lekki toll gate, the epicenter of the 2020 NSAS protest, there was anticipation that protesters may return there, but only a handful of protesters showed up.
We need the prices of things to just calm down. You understand? People are dying every day. Do you understand? People are dying. You can see. Everybody's scared of coming out. I'm the only person that had to. I'm surprised I'm the only woman here.
Back to Ikeja, where most protesters gather, the procession begins and the designated protest ground in Ojota is their destination.
The protest, we describe it as a national protest.
They sing and their banners also scream. Organizers of the protest are calling for the reversal of the fuel price hike, the restoration of the affordable electricity tariffs, and the reduction of import duties to their previous rates. The groups are also demanding the reversal of many institutions' hikes in tertiary tuition. They're asking for full transparency and accountability in governance, among other demands. After walking for more than 5 kilometers at about 11 a.m., they arrived at the designated point. The Commissioner of Police, Adigoke Fayade, came to the protest ground. He says the heavy presence of his men and those of other agencies is to provide security for the protesters.
My message to the protesters is that they should just remain peaceful. We are begging them to be peaceful and express their grievances and other things they want to express. But it must be expressed in a peaceful manner.
With no record of violence or any major incident, at exactly 4 p.m., the protesters dispersed, promising to reconvene at 7 a.m. on Friday. Dari Idu, Channels Television News.
Well, as the End Bad Governance got underway in Lagos, let's take a look at the Lekki axis, which is one of the areas of interest in judging from events from October 20 EndSARS protest. Our correspondent, Olu Phillips, reports that security operatives prevented protesters from using that venue. Let's find out the details.
My day starts at 1 a.m. by returning to the epicenter of October 2020 event, and it's a lot of adrenaline rush. Some police officers have already arrived ahead of any would-be the protester and are trying to take up strategic spaces. Except for those who conceived and brewed what has been summed up to a catchphrase, #Endbadgovernance, August 1, 2024 is here with a lot of skepticisms. As we moved around at dawn, within the toll plaza, evidences of the destruction that held in October 2020 still lie around. The number of operatives at this venue is enough signal of a no-flight zone. Scanning around on the ever-busy Lekki Expressway all the way to Abraham Adesanya Junction, many residents have simply chosen to avoid the streets and business centers. Back at the toll plaza, some folks made the decision to test the waters by trying to converge on the Lekki toll plaza. They got smoked.
A day before now, I've seen a bit of tension. I see, the police people walking around vans, rally, and all of those. I saw the rally coming up. Even me witnessing the rally alone. If I want to partake in even coming up for rally, well, come on, I won't do that. Because I really saw it's a signal. It's a signal of threat, if I would say. But, I keep my calm.
They insisted that we should go to the designated area where the protest is going on. That is not a problem for us. We want to ensure that all protesters are safe, and we are going to the protest. And the 10 days protest is going to go smooth and fine.
Moving things around, we traveled to the mainland of Lagos metropolis. The spirit here is high and palpable, but in the shadows of the 2012 and 2020 protest engagements.
I'm riding from Festac, from my 2. I'm coming from Festac. My son at 13 is the program. I can't even buy data for him to learn more. I can't even pay for the institution fee. Millions of naira. At 13, he can program them. Good luck Benjamin is his name. My name is Ogu Benjamin Chidoke. So I'd rather die on the street than die at home.
Just so we aren't missing out of the push by the protesters here, what is it for them?
We are seeing say that 3 things that we are demanding. Bring back fuel subsidy. 1. Bring back naira subsidy. Then bring electricity subsidy.
One of the primary suggestions and demands we are making is for security to be restored in the north. Because if we have security in the north, then food security will be assured across the country.
Nigerians have woken up.
Those who are afraid that there will be violence or will not be able to march, they should start coming to Ojota. The struggle has started.
This is what it is. Whilst the naira is being floated, whilst we're having this high-level inflation, whilst some experts have told us that the interest rate fixed by the CBN isn't beneficial in terms of job creation and all of that, that is the areas that government needs to begin to respond.
One day down, perhaps many more to go. Who will bat the first eyelid? Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
The Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetoku, has said the policeman was murdered while on duty during the End Bad Governance nationwide protest. Speaking in Abuja at the briefing, Mr. Egbetoku lamented that the leaders of the protest were not around to lead the rallies despite the initial warnings of the police, noting the hoodlums took over the demonstrations. He also says the Nigeria Police Force has placed all units on red alert. He also added that officers are fully mobilized and prepared to respond swiftly and decisively to public safety and order.
Regrettably, events in some major cities today show that what was being instigated was mass uprising and looting, not protest. Those who were in the forefront of promoting the idea of the protest were not around to lead it. Hoodlums have been let loose on innocent Nigerians and their hard-earned businesses and property looted and destroyed. The motive of the rioters was basically two: loot and destroy both private and government property. The destruction so far has been mind-boggling. There has been destruction in Kano, Borno, Yobe, Kaduna, Gombe, Bauchi, FCT, Abuja, Niger, and Jigawa. Police stations have been destroyed. There have been attempts to take over government houses, looting of government infrastructures. Several warehouses and shops so far have been looted and in several instances completely destroyed. In places like FCT, Kaduna, Kano, and Gombe, among others, we recorded incidents of unprovoked attacks on our security personnel, where one policeman has been reported murdered and others seriously injured. In the light of the current situation, the Nigerian Police Force has placed all units on red alert. Our officers are fully mobilized and prepared to respond swiftly and decisively to any further threats to public safety and order. We remain committed and resolute to protecting lives and property and ensuring that law and order are maintained across the nation. Groups who are hiding under the guise of exercise of a right provided in the Constitution to destabilize the country should also remember that the same Constitution imposed on them the duty to obey the laws of the land and respect the rights of other citizens. The police is equipped to respond appropriately to the unfolding situations and will get assistance from other security agencies, including the military, if the need arises.
Still ahead on the news at 10, the CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises, Muda Yusuf, analyzes the estimated economic impact of the nationwide hardship protest. And that's on Business News. Please join us again. Welcome back. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. George Akume, believes that the administration of President Bola Tinubu is making concessions and will continue to make more to benefit Nigerians. Mr. Akume stated this during a visit to members of the Charismatic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria in the nation's capital, Abuja, while acknowledging that the administration knows the challenges Nigerians are experiencing following the removal of fuel subsidy. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation explains that the measures put in place are already yielding positive results. He calls for patience with the administration.
Members of the Charismatic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria are having this engagement with the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. George Akume, to communicate the concerns of Nigerians to the government. The clergymen are not backing the ongoing protest, and Mr. Akume explains efforts from the government to address the challenges in the country.
We're going to create 2 million hectares of land for agriculture. We're going to have 66 dams. more towns will emerge. So the opportunities are immense. The possibilities are great. When you begin to talk about the achievements of this government, sometimes you don't know from where to start and where to end.
The Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Christian Pilgrim Commission, Bishop Stephen Adegbite, joined the call against the protests, describing Nigeria as God's project.
Whoever knows what is right and fails to do it, to him or her, it is a sin. So for us to have a better Nigeria, you don't cross the red line. You don't stop. You should stop when they ask you to stop. And when they ask you to move, you should move. So don't say nobody's looking at you, you are doing it. And you want better administration, you want better government, you want better Nigeria. When you are not playing your own part, it doesn't work out that way. You must do your own, I do my own, and we have a wonderful Nigeria.
Meanwhile, members of the Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace urged the federal government to reassess its policies and cut costs to ease the suffering of Nigerians.
The desperate need for peace. IDFE acknowledges the frustrations and hardship experienced by the masses in Nigeria. We urge all the parties to embrace dialogue in the spirit of nation building. Similar to this, we call on government to reassess its interventions and policies such that it will make immediate meaning to the ordinary citizens of the country by way of cutting costs of governance, providing enabling environment for ease of doing businesses, cutting cost of production of goods and services.
Nevertheless, the group is urging the protesters to sheath their swords and engage the government in the interest of peace.
The senior advocate of Nigeria, Ebonlu Adegboruwa, has been speaking on the outcome of the Endbadgovernance protest in Nigeria, which started across the nation today. In a statement he personally signed, Mr. Adegboruwa saluted the courage and the resilience of all Nigerians who responded to the call for protest to end bad governance in the country, despite the threats, intimidation and harassment by authorities of the ruling government and their security agencies. According to him, the situation has so far been largely peaceful, well-coordinated and non-target, especially in Lagos and Abuja, in spite of pockets of skirmishes in some parts of the nation. He also appealed to all security and law enforcement agencies to follow acceptable standards of handling civil protest in such a way to avoid bloodshed or loss of lives, adding that the responsibility imposed upon all security agencies is to provide coverage for the peaceful protesters and avoid all provocative action that may escalate into uncomfortable fracas. While asking organizers of the nationwide protest to continue in the same peaceful manner, Mr. Adegboruwa also advised the federal and state governments to set up missionaries for genuine and meaningful dialogue with protesters with a view to addressing the issues raised and their demands. In the meantime, senior advocate of Nigeria and human rights activist Mr. Femi Falana says that one of the early lessons to be learned from day one of the protests is the need for government to engage the youth. Mr. Falana was speaking on our political program, Politics Today.
For me, we should now begin to draw the necessary lessons from what happened today. First of all, is the need for the government, and I'm not talking of the federal government alone, the federal government, the state government, the local government, and all authorities in our country to learn to move speedily to douse tension in the country, to learn to engage people, as I did suggest a couple of weeks ago. The government must engage, the young people who are aggrieved. Unlike some of us who said we didn't know who the organizers of the protest were or are, the State Security Service claim to know them. And so once they have been identified, what the government should have done was to engage them. And for me, it is more urgent than ever before to begin that constructive engagement in the interest of the country. And in the entire country today, I think it was only in Rivers State, where the governor came out, Governor Fubara, to address the crowd. And for the young people, you could see it on television. They felt substantially fulfilled, that at least somebody was listening to them and somebody was assuring them that their complaints will be attended to. And that should happen all over the place. And then we must also learn to stop mobilizing people to disrupt rallies. We must stop mobilizing traditional institutions or traditional rulers and some emergency organizations, youth bodies, to say, oh, we are pulling out of the protest. Did you plan the protest with anybody? So the government must now begin to identify those who are genuinely aggrieved and then begin to engage them. What are your complaints?
Well, let's go back to demonstrations today and the nationwide hardship protest. It was largely peaceful in states across the south. Our correspondents monitor the situation in Ogun, Ekiti, Rivers, Delta, and many more.
In Ogun State, youths who are exercising their fundamental rights to protest held a brief rally at the Moshood Abiola Stadium, Abeokuta, the designated center for the state capital. Armed with various placards, they expressed their anger and frustration over the hardship in the country. But apart from this handful gathering, the situation largely remained calm across the state. Only a few vehicles can be seen plying the roads. Commercial and business activities were ground to a halt, while security operatives were deployed to strategic locations in the state's capital to forestall any breakdown of law and order. In Oyo State, protesters converged under Iwo Road Bridge as early as 9 a.m. They started their street procession around 10 a.m. with security agencies monitoring their movement. Scores of policemen were also posted at strategic areas across the town to keep the peace. The protest proceeded peacefully as people, with a few traders also going about their businesses in some areas. The protesters and the police are in agreement that the protest will continue to remain peaceful. In Ado-Ekiti, Ekiti State capital, the atmosphere is calm as there was no sign of protesters on major streets. This might not be unconnected with the statewide broadcast of the governor on Wednesday, appealing to citizens to consider the negative effects of such protests. In Port Harcourt, the River State capital, protesters were on the streets as early as 7:30 a.m. They gathered opposite the Port Harcourt Pleasure Park with their banners and placards and marched from there all the way down Aba Road towards the government house, with their ranks swelling as they progressed. There was also a heavy presence of security operatives of the Nigerian police, civil defense, the army, and even the DSS. Governor Fubara, who received the protesters at the government house, hailed their peaceful disposition, even as he gives the assurance that their demands will be met.
I'm thanking you because you're here. I'm thanking you because you're here. to demand for a better You're here because you want a better Nigeria, is it not? But like I said yesterday, I am one of you. I feel your pain. And in our own government here, we are doing everything to make life easy for our people. But you see, this particular protest that we are doing now, our only worry is that we know that a lot of people are planning to take advantage of this protest to destroy our state. But we will not allow it. So, like I said before, I want to thank you for being peaceful. I already know your problems. We will communicate your problems to the federal government.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
In the world of business, businesses and commercial activities were mostly shut today as the 10-day nationwide hardship protest began across the country. Major markets, which usually record a beehive of activities, were deserted. Many residents stayed indoors for fear that violence could arise from the protests. Observations by Channels Television show that banks and other financial and public institutions in most parts of Lagos, Ogun, Osun, and Oyo were all under lock and key as a safety precaution. Although the hardship protests have so far been peaceful in most parts of the southwestern region, on its first day, there was less commercial vehicle activities, while security personnel were on guard to forestall any form of violence. Meanwhile, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises has reacted to the nationwide protest. In a statement released by its CEO, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the economic think tank says the economy of Lagos State, Nigeria's commercial capital, was completely grounded on day one of the protest, leading to an estimated loss of about 100 billion naira. According to Dr. Yusuf, and the outcome of the first day of the protest are very troubling, as Lagos State is very vulnerable to the collapse of law and order. The CPPE chief calls on the organizers to announce the immediate suspension of the protest to avoid a complete breakdown of law and order, which could result in severe negative consequence. Let's head to the stock market now. In the midst of the nationwide protest, the domestic stock market was open for trade today, but the bears continued to undermine the overall performance of listed equities. And John Mekwa has the details.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, on a day like this, we see one of the useful lessons from the COVID-19 outbreak because in spite of the intentional or non-intentional restriction of physical movement in Nigeria because of the hardship protest that the NGX, Nigeria Stock Exchange Market, traded today, albeit virtually. And so virtual trade, we have the results today, but the hardest hit seems to be MTN Nigeria because even though it opened at 200 naira, the close of trade at that market mover had dropped to 190 naira with 10 naira taken off each share price. Profit taking hit it real hard right there. Now we look at the counters and see a little bit, maybe one good news right there. Banking has been down for about 2 sessions, but we see a recovery there. So banking is up today 0.42%, and that's because of recovery from Accesscon and Zenith Bank. They've been suffering profit-taking for some time, so I guess it's time for bargain hunting right there. Consumer goods is still down 0.55%. Dangote Sugar and Guinness did that, while oil and gas has been hit also. With investors taking some of those cherry picking and on it 0.05%. Japan Gold has been surging for about 2 or 3 sessions, so investors naturally want to take profit. Oando is also down. At the close of today's virtual trading, we saw the market lost 235 billion naira, and the market cap closed at 55.278 trillion naira, and yes, it's down 0.42%. So in spite of all the protests, there was trading, and the bear is still the winner.
Outside our shores, U.S. President Joe Biden has successfully secured the release of 3 American citizens and a U.S. green card holder, along with other detainees, in a historic prisoner swap with Russia in Turkey. Here's Simon Pisa with other international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Israel's military says it has confirmed that Hamas's military chief, Mohammed Deif, was killed in an airstrike in the Gaza Strip last month. Deif was targeted in the strike on a compound in the Khan Yunis area on the 13th of July. Hamas is yet to confirm his death. Here a video released by the Israeli army they claim shows the airstrike. Israel says Deif was one of the figures responsible for planning the 7th of October attacks in southern Israel, in which 1,200 people were killed and 251 taken hostage. Meanwhile, thousands have turned out for the funeral procession in Iran for the head of Hamas's political wing, Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed in a strike in Tehran. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, led prayers for the Hamas leader, whose body will be buried in Qatar. US media have quoted Iranian officials as saying the supreme leader has ordered a direct attack against Israel, which it says was responsible for the attack on Iranian soil. Israel has not commented on the assassination directly. Families of hostages held by Hamas since its attack on Israel on October the 7th have marked the 300th day of their loved ones in captivity. Some family members blocked a main highway in Tel Aviv with the number 300 painted in yellow on the road, while others painted the number in red on an overhead bridge. Others gathered outside the city's museum, a plaza that became known as the Hostages Square, where a table was set up for the 115 hostages still held by the Islamist group Hamas that rules the Gaza Strip. The U.S. Department of Defense says 3 of the men accused of plotting the September the 11th, 2001 attacks on the U.S. have entered into a pre-trial agreement. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 2 of his accomplices have agreed to plead guilty. They've been held for years at Guantanamo Bay without charge. Details of the deal have not been announced, but U.S. news outlets say the men will plead guilty in exchange for the prosecution agreeing not to seek the death penalty. Nearly 3,000 people in New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania were killed in the attacks, which later sparked the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. Indian soldiers are rushing to complete construction of a metal bridge to connect the worst affected area in the landslides that struck India's Kerala. The search for survivors and bodies has entered its 3rd day in a disaster that has killed at least 178 people. Drone footage shows the extent of the landslides and the massive destruction to property and farmlands in the district of Wayanad in Kerala. Heavy rain sent torrents of mud, water and tumbling boulders downhill, burying or sweeping people away living in villages to their deaths as they slept. A court in Guinea has sentenced the former military ruler Musa Dadis Camara to 20 years in prison for crimes against humanity. The charges stemmed from one of the worst massacres in the nation's history, the killing of more than 156 people after troops opened fire at a rally held in September 2009 to demand a return to civilian rule. Camara took power in a coup when longtime President Lansana Conté died in 2008, but he fled the country after surviving an assassination attempt not long after the massacre. He returned from exile in Burkina Faso in September 2022 to face justice, insisting that he was innocent. And a new AI robot called Claws is hoping to push the boundaries of farming in a bid to make the industry more sustainable. This tech startup has created a farming robot dubbed Claws, or Concentrated Light Autonomous Weeding and Scouting, that combines artificial intelligence and robotics. Weeding is done using a concentrated light technology, which is different from a laser, that targets and eliminates weeds without damaging surrounding crops or soil. It's hoped it will reduce greenhouse gas emissions that could be released from soil disturbance.
Our patented technology uses concentrated light, so the best way of describing it is a schoolboy with a magnifying glass. So it concentrates the light onto a small focal point on the meristem, the growing point of the weed, and delivers a small pulse of energy, which is enough to kill the weed.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
And the main news again. Demonstrators took to the streets in major cities across the nation to protest against economic hardship despite the government's last-ditch effort to prevent the protest. And that's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Good night and God bless Nigeria.